You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 23rd of August 2013. The barren wombs of smart women. Unite produces videos for lessons in strategies for public protest to brainwash schoolchildren. Belgium, Syrian jihadist wife gets her integration money cut off. Germany, city government demands shop owners avoid using Christian symbols in Christmas lights. Nick Griffin MEP who today tackles fracking. Iranian TV, Western war crimes in Syria exposed. Climate theories crumble as data and experts suggest global cooling. Thought for the day, are we seeking another Holocaust or not in Syria? And finally, they seek 'em there, they seek 'em everywhere, and over here. UK news. The barren wombs of smart women. Jim Goad of Takis magazine summarises London School of Economics researcher Satoshi Kanazawa's book The Intelligence Paradox. In the book, Kanazawa says, a statistical analysis from England suggests a woman's IQ is inversely proportional to her desire to breed. Controlling for variables such as education and income, he reached the following conclusions. With each increase of 15 IQ points, a woman's urge to reproduce is diminished by 25%. The average IQ of women who want children is 5.6 points lower than those who don't want them. Among all 45-year-old women in England, 20% are childless, but this figure rises to 43% among those with college degrees. The paradox is that women who are measurably more intelligent based on IQ tests are dumber in terms of evolutionary survival instincts. Goad closes with the grand irony that it is by failing to breed, this new breed of woman will breed itself out of existence. World at 8 comments, thank God I'm a thicket. Unite produces videos for lessons in strategies for public protest to brainwash schoolchildren, the Daily Mail reports. The Unite Union has launched a campaign to teach children how to carry out militant protests. Pupils could be given lessons on how to make placards, oppose local businesses and fight plans for privatisation. Videos have even been produced which encourage children to defy school rules. Unite, run by left-wing firebrand Len McCluskey, has joined forces with the main teaching unions, the NUT, NAS/UWT and the Association of Teachers and Lecturers to get the material into schools. Last night, head teachers and Tory MPs described Unite's plans as reprehensible. Nigel Adams MP said, "This propaganda is almost North Korean. It might be acceptable in the schools of Pyongyang, but not in Britain. These cack-handed attempts to peddle trade union ideology in schools would be funny if it wasn't so dangerous." Mike Griffiths, head of Northampton School for Boys, said, "If anyone even remotely suggested it where I work, they'd get short shrift." The notion of encouraging children to undermine teachers is reprehensible. World at 8. At last someone is realising the grim truth that most of our children are propagandised from birth by Labour, Marxism and the Common Purpose Brigade. European news. Belgium, Syrian jihadist wife gets her integration money cut off. The Centre for Public Assistance in Antwerp has suspended the payment of integration money to the wife of a presumed Syrian combatant. According to the weekly newspaper Het Nieuwsblad op Zondag, the husband of the woman concerned, a member of the radical Salafist organisation Sharia for Belgium, is said to have left for Syria in May. This woman lives in social housing with her 3 children. Until now she was receiving an integration payment of €1,000 per month. Her husband refuses to provide for his family. He was a member of the radical Salafist organisation Sharia for Belgium, now disbanded, and left for Syria last May. His own integration payment was suspended shortly afterwards. This woman doesn't speak Dutch, even though she's lived in Antwerp for more than 6 years. She told us that she would not learn Dutch and that she doesn't want to look for work. In cases of this type we would always take the same decision. In the meantime, the Antwerp police have carried out checks in the homes of various jeunes, that is young men and young women, to see if they have left for Syria. If so, they will be erased from the population register, which in some cases will mean that their parents will receive no more family benefits. Sheradanine Zakawi, reported for Islam versus Europe, says, "This is the first I've heard of these integration payments." So the Belgian government routinely pays out €1,000 a month for years to incoming Muslims, even though they don't learn the language, don't look for work and participate in openly declared jihadist organisations. Germany. City government demands shop owners avoid using Christian symbols in Christian lights. The aim of refraining from the use of Christian symbols in the new Christmas lights in the city centre has met with criticism and incomprehension. "This is a misinterpretation of what tolerance means," said the former city deacon, Father Heinz Manfred Janssen, speaking to the ST newspaper. Christian festivals would be senseless and empty if their content was no longer understood. Even in the City Hall there is unhappiness about the plans from retailers and city management. Tolerance amongst religions should allow for Christmas lights to contain recognisably Christian symbols, explained city manager Hartmut Hoferichter. The cause of the irritation is statements made by Christoph Kravchik. The city manager from the city centre office had indicated that the new lighting concept for Christmas time would aim for neutral elements. "It should appeal to everyone," he said. "In the end we are living in a multicultural world." Germany always succeeded in integrating people of another faith without forgetting its own traditions in the process, said Solingen's FDP leader Ulrich G. Müller. "Why should we deny our own roots? We are still the majority in this city. And those who are coming to us and living here in the third or fourth generation will have these roots sometimes too. World at 8 states. Well, Christoph Kravchik doesn't even sound German, and I'm surprised that the Germans are rolling over with a pot of Vaseline for the mainly Islamic elements in their towns, especially in light of their religious history. Bring out the Christmas bells and Christ's cradle and all, rub their noses in it so people don't forget they are in Europe now." I now hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP, who is talking today about fracking and the large businesses behind it and other assorted goodies.
Parliament is shut until next week, so there are still a few days without any news of any more crazed EU meddling or red tape bondage scandals. Normal service will, however, resume shortly. In the meantime, with fracking being so much in the news, it's worth our while taking a closer look at some of the main issues in the shale gas controversy. It's now well known that, despite widespread local opposition, fracking has transformed the energy situation in the USA. The question is, can, or should, it do the same here in Britain? Obviously, there's a huge amount of propaganda out there about fracking. On the one hand, the claims about burning tap water are, it has to be said, exaggerated. But on the other, so too are many of the claims made by the pro-fracking lobbies, financed by the oil industry, perhaps the most destructive and rapacious gang of corporations in the world, after the banks. How seriously should we take their claims? Well, here's a clue for you. Halliburton. That's the giant company headed by George Bush's right-hand man, or perhaps more accurately puppet master, Dick Cheney. Former US Vice President Cheney is one of the neocon gang that created the disastrous Iraq War. I say disastrous from the point of view of a normal, rational human being who sees mass murder, thousands of children being born with birth defects caused by depleted uranium shells, crushing government debt, and the deaths and maimings of thousands of British soldiers as self-evidently bad. From the point of view of Halliburton, on the other hand, the Iraq War was a nice little earner. They made billions of dollars supplying the US military as they demolished Iraq, and then made billions more rebuilding it. Nice work if you can get it, which only Halliburton did on the key contracts where they were the only company even allowed to bid. But what's this got to do with fracking? Rather a lot, if truth be known, because the worldwide patents for shale gas fracking are owned by Halliburton. That's right, the people who gave us the lies about WMDs and hence the Iraq War also make fortunes from fracking. How comfortable does that make you feel about those rosy pro-fracking claims about energy self-sufficiency and safety? One of the claims made by pro-frackers worries me even more though, because it's true. At a pro-fracking briefing meeting I attended in Brussels last year, industry partisans acclaimed the fact that the majority of the companies involved in the huge shale gas industry in the USA are SMEs, small to medium enterprises. So you see, fracking isn't being done by the big bad oil giants. It's a small, friendly industry run by honest, hard-working little self-employed chaps in hard hats, a bit like a young John Wayne. Plenty of room for the little guys, plenty of local jobs. Ah, and if you believe that, you'll believe anything. A glimpse of the big business realities of shale gas fracking was given this week in an article in the Daily Telegraph on the 21st of August. Entitled, "Poland's Shale Drive Will Transform Europe if it doesn't drop the ball," this dwelt at some length on the problems encountered by those trying to develop the industry in Poland. Incidentally, the majority of the shale gas exploration licenses in Poland are owned by one George Soros. Two Polish experts quoted in the Telegraph article give us a glimpse of just how big an operation fracking really is. Quote, "There have been a number of very poor boreholes so far," said Mr. Pravava, now at the Energy Studies Institute in Warsaw. "This has to be admitted, but it was mostly due to lack of experience. We need at least 100 lateral drills to reach any conclusion. So far, there have only been 6. The piece continues, quote, "Mr. Fanning said it's a fallacy that Polish shale gas is unusually hard to extract. The rocks are 2,500 to 4,000 metres deep, which is not so different from the US. Even if they're deeper, there's more pressure, so you get more gas out. It balances out. The catalyst that is missing in Poland is sheer intensity of drilling. You need 60 wells in each area to find the right recipe. Until you start fracking, you're just guessing. There have been only 3 or 4 horizontal fracks in the country so far," unquote. Drilling through 12,000 feet of rock, then having to drill sideways at least 100 times. 60 wells in each area just to find the right recipe. Does that really sound like the kind of thing your local garage owner could get into as an SME sideline? Of course not. But it is a fact that the majority of fracking companies in the USA are small to medium enterprises. So what's going on? It's really very simple and very sinister. They are indeed SMEs on paper. And that's for a very good, or, from the point of view of residents of vast swathes of Lancashire, Cheshire, Yorkshire, Staffordshire, Kent, Sussex, Dorset, South Wales and Scotland, a very bad reason. The giant oil companies are the only people with the equipment, know-how and money to run such huge-scale operations. But they set up SME front companies with very limited share capital to be the legal owners of their fracking businesses. This small front company takes the profits and launders them to the parent company. The wells are exhausted after a couple of years, and the leased equipment is moved on to pastures new. The temporary eyesores of drilling rigs every few hundred yards, the thundering lorries, the open waste pits of millions of gallons of recycled water laced with poisonous fracking chemicals, it all gets tidied away. The scarred, industrialised landscape begins to return to normal. House prices might even start to recover. And then local people find that the capped wells are leaking into the water table, so they call the company to arrange the required clean-up operation, only to find that it's gone into liquidation. Its small nominal share capital wouldn't in any case even have paid for the survey needed to assess the scale of the damage, let alone cover the potentially astronomical costs of putting it right, even if that's possible when you're dealing with polluted groundwater. There's no point setting lawyers on the parent company because the SME front covers all the legal responsibility and it's vanished. So the cleanups either won't get done at all or they'll have to be funded by the government. Except that there's no such thing as government money. There's only money the government gouges out of people like you and me through 1,001 different taxes. Speaking with a very senior expert from the Russian energy giant Gazprom in Parliament last year, he told me that this was precisely what caused Russia to reject a proposal by one of the biggest American oil companies for a joint venture in the Russian Arctic recently. The company with which the Russians were about to sign the contract had the name of the parent company. It looked like the US parent company. It sounded like the US parent company. It was going to use the equipment of the US parent company. But when the Russians looked into its ownership structure, they found that the company wanting to exploit a vast chunk of Russia was legally a totally independent, limited company with a mere $10,000 worth of share capital. All its assurances about clean-up operations were worthless. So, since Russia's run by nationalists, they told them where to stick their contract. We need to tell people these facts. Fracking is already becoming a huge issue in British politics, and it's going to become an even bigger issue in the lives of families and entire communities all over the country in the next few years. As nationalists, we understand the key responsibility of governments is to think long term, to take into account the interests of future generations, as well as the short-term need of any society for cash. Accordingly, our instinctive and informed reaction to shale gas fracking is that, while it may be appropriate in the vast, almost unpopulated wide open spaces of the USA or the Russian Arctic, it's wholly unsuitable for our crowded little islands. It is irresponsible madness to risk environmental disaster for the sake of a few years' cheap gas, or rather big gas profits for foreign companies, and a tax windfall for the Treasury to blow on foreign aid and criminal foreign wars. Unfortunately, the criminal stupidity of successive recent governments, particularly since the Climate Change Act was passed through Parliament with just 2 MPs voting against it, means that Britain has wasted so much time and money fighting the mythical threat of man-made climate change that we're fast running out of energy options. Our coal industry has been murdered. Our nuclear industry sold off to foreigners. Our power stations are being closed thanks to EU regulations. Our beautiful countryside has been despoilt by armies of near-useless subsidised wind turbines, and our energy bills have been inflated to line the pockets of carbon criminals. As a result, the lights will soon start going out, and the pressure to exploit shale gas will grow and grow. Which, of course, is why big oil, particularly Shell, surreptitiously funded the useful idiot Watermelon Greens to discredit the coal and nuclear industries in the first place. The BNP position is simple. If Labour and condemn folly really has left Britain with no choice but to develop shale gas in at least some areas, then the loot, pollute and scoot model of foreign corporations hiding behind limited liability SMEs must be banned. Instead, the reserve should be carefully developed by a state-owned company run on the same lines as Norway's hugely successful nationalised oil industry. But while that would ensure that all the jobs went to Brits, that all the money stayed in Britain, and that funds will be set aside for proper clean-ups and complete environmental restoration, if that's possible, it's still far from ideal. Steel rusts. Concrete rots. Can we really guarantee the long-term safety of sealed-up disused wells? Think back to the aftermath of earlier fossil energy exploitation and the coal slag heaps that bothered no one. And remember Aberfan. Far better then to take urgent action right now to develop the energy technologies needed to put the oil and gas era behind us by choice, rather than because we run out, as we've already virtually run out, of North Sea oil. The present government's efforts in this regard are, needless to say, pathetic. The UK spent a mere £66 million on nuclear research and development in 2011. MP's expenses that same year totalled £71 million. The Condem's long-term plan for nuclear energy, published this year, committed £15 million for a new world-class national nuclear users facility, awarded a total of £18 million to 36 nuclear research and development projects, and allocated £12.5 million to join the Jules Horowitz test reactor programme that's being constructed in France. That's £45.5 million for our nuclear future, while MP's expenses this year will come to more than twice that. We can see where Parliament's commitment lies. Back in the 1960s, Britain led the way with research into the generation of electricity in ultra-safe thorium plants. The Dragon reactor in Winfrith, Dorset, built on experiments in the USA in the 1950s and showed great promise before being shut down to cut costs. As the headline on another article in the Telegraph on the 21st of August pointed out, quote, scientists turning their attention to thorium, a cleaner and cheaper alternative to uranium, unquote. The huge potential of thorium is now being worked on in Norway and China, leaving Britain to slip behind in yet another field in which we could have led the world. And while the government grudgingly puts £45 million into a pathetically inadequate nuclear research programme, they plan happily to blow a staggering £72 billion on HS2, just to knock 20 minutes off the train journey from Manchester to London. There is an argument for high-speed rail. The northwest of England could well benefit from the improved connection, but the price is now simply too high. HS2 should be shelved at once, and the money instead invested in a massive, coordinated plan to increase the energy efficiency of everything we do in Britain, and to develop new world-beating homegrown industries in deep wave energy, clean coal, solar power, thorium, and hydrogen power for transport. There is an enormous prize to be had in terms of recreating our hard industrial base, our future export earnings, and the return of skilled and well-paid working-class jobs on a huge scale. And in addition, prompt action on those lines would allow us to leave shale gas safely in the ground and our green and pleasant land intact and unspoilt for future generations.
Thank you, Nick. The one thing worrying me is the large difference in the actual depth of drilling needed between the so-called established fracking ops in the US and us in the UK. Friends of the Earth say this risks earthquakes, but the experts say that in millions of fracking operations in the US there's not been one tremor big enough to cause damage. Now, although not an expert, this doesn't make sense, as Chris Wright, Chief Director of Liberty Resources in the US and one of its biggest investors, says that in Britain the shale beds are more than a mile thick, as opposed to the US where they're just a few hundred feet. Now, as a newbie to fracking language, I would have thought if we had a larger amount of earth and rock to drill through to our shale beds, which are apparently deeper than the American ones, then our drilling would be more damaging to that area than just going down a shorter distance, as they do in the States. World News. Iranian TV Western war crimes in Syria exposed. Press TV Iran says there was a time during the 30-minute covert dirty war in Syria when the Western governments and mainstream media would make a clamour over reported massacres. Now, despicably, these governments and media just ignore such atrocities. Why? Because it's increasingly clear that the groups committing these crimes against thousands of Syrian civilians are the foreign-backed mercenaries, whom the Western media and their governments have tried to lionise as rebels fighting for democratic freedom. That charade is rapidly disintegrating, exposing not just criminal Western governments sponsoring the violence against civilians, but an entire media industry that's also guilty of war crimes through its willful complicity. This is not just mere hyperbole. To disseminate false information and lies about conflict under the guise of independent news is to be complicit in covering up war crimes. You can hardly get more serious misconduct than to tell lies about crimes against humanity. World at 8, as much as it galls me, I have to agree with Iranian TV for the English-speaking world on this particular subject, which features in my Thought for the Day today. Climate theories crumble as data and experts suggest global cooling. The so-called global warming alarmists are in a frenzy after the latest climate data confirm the Earth actually appears to be entering a potential cooling trend. Sea ice cover in Antarctica is growing to record levels, tornadoes and hurricanes are at record lows, and more. According to experts, the most recent revelations continue to make a mockery of alarmist claims, debunking United Nations theories about human-caused global warming and the wildly inaccurate supposed climate models used to forecast doom and gloom by forces seeking carbon taxes and more centralised government. Proponents of what is known as anthropogenic global warming theories, which claim that human activity is to blame for alleged warming, have long warned that increasing levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would lead to catastrophic warming. The problem is that even based on data gathered by the planet's premier climate alarmists, the UK Met Office for example, or various US agencies, shows that global warming stopped more than a decade and a half ago, as the New American reported last year. Already, in an apparent effort to save face, and perhaps huge amounts of taxpayer funding, NOAA was caught using cherry-picked scattered weather anecdotes as evidence that the globe is warming. If you think scientists just couldn't get any more incompetent, then think again. Gosling continued in his report, demolishing the government's bogus claims. Thought for the day. Are we seeing another Holocaust in Syria or not? Thought for the day. Are we seeing yet another Holocaust or not? You will have to judge for yourselves if we in the West will be paraded around the various sites of terrible acts of man's inhumanity to man and made to pay for it unto the 10th generation. Or will it all simply get lost or be the subject of years of misinformation and heavily biased media to teach anyone in the future not to be patriotic or fight for a governing body already in place, or indeed the other more likely option of bringing in all the rest of the world and its mother to do one's dirty work for them under the much used guise of democracy and the people. I think we can all guess what could happen if allowed. Cue Iraq and Libya and the so-called Arab Spring, which is in fact the Arab winter of their discontent, taken on by the UN, NATO and the EU like a soiled baby who needs its nappy changed. Now my message to like-minded people is totally ignore the pictures and films on the mainstream television, that media of which Marx and Goebbels would have been proud, and the same media to which even the lazy-minded Brits stay glued, screwed and tattooed to most of the time. Even the newscasters on ITV especially are turning blue in the face with indignation and horror when broadcasting the carefully cut clips that have been sent to them via the even more biased Northern Irish reporter who always does the Palestinians and seems to love a good massacre, especially when it's on the wrong side he's promoting. Now, I'm not a Holocaust denier, never have been, never will, but I am open to the fact that many of these poor souls died of hunger and disease, and that a large number of the millions were not just Jewish, but anti the Third Reich, homosexuals, gypsies and political prisoners. That is not denying the Holocaust occurred, like the Muslims seem to and get away with, but that, like all terrible acts of war that take place within the countries at war, happen, and we all know history is written by the victors and not on the screens of Hollywood, who, if we face the sad fact, have been making millions of dollars from the Nazis, the Third Reich and World War II since it ended. Vis-a-vis the Pacific War as well, but I digress. Now back to ITV, and we were just warned before it started that the pickies would upset people, and this was just to build up the hype and to get you all waiting for the inevitable terribleness of it. And of course it came. A very overlong section of the news was devoted to pickies of children crying and dead babies, but very little was shown of the places that received this chemical cocktail and why. Now, call me cynical, and I'm sure you will, but why just children? Why is it that whenever we get news footage out of a Muslim country, it always contains children? Do they think we in the West are any more prone to ahhing and umming over a child? Forgive me, but this lady ain't for turning in that direction either. Now, unless all these poor little mites were lined up in one place at one time without any adults to speak of present, and then one side or the other showered them with nasty chemicals, took the pictures and walked away, then I fail to see how numerically this could be achieved, especially as some of the so-called footage has been taken off old shots, and according to Russia Today, much of these films were posted before the actual event allegedly occurred. Please see link at bottom of this thought and under the general heading of News of Chemical Weapons Attack in Syria, published one day before massacre happened. Islamic Invitation Turkey. More proofs of the false nature of the claims being parroted by the media in support of political pygmies with a lust for blood. Now, it seems very sad that to get proper informed news and not the almost hysterical diatribe given out on BBC, ITV, Sky, and with the US Fox News hovering on the fence with Obama, who knows the truth but would never admit it, it's Russia Today that, apart from your own nationalist World at 8, that imparts the nearest thing to the truth, which is often unpalatable but a necessary force in reporting. You have to face facts that all the reports out of Iraq were false. Libya was a set-up and a farce which had dangerous repercussions for all of the Arab world and led to Egypt, which, unless the generals get a strong government going, will never be the same country it was. And now we have Syria. And I have the greatest respect for President Bashar al-Assad. He is fighting not only the heavily funded Islamic fundamentalist military machine, but, like the Nazis, although I use this with trepidation, Assad is fighting without God on his side. God is clearly black, Christian, very wealthy from arms deals, and wears the ridiculous badge of democracy firmly stamped on his forehead, with the UN and NATO and the Western press firmly up his backside, and the green flag of jihadist Islam gripped in his hands. Now, poor old baby-killing Assad has the devil on his side. And I say this because actually fighting protesters and troublemakers in your own country is clearly the work of the devil and the Antichrist. Try to keep your country safe and doing away with people who would ruin it, and indeed come into your country from abroad to do so, albeit ably funded from God and his arms deals, is clearly the work of Mr. Satan from downstairs. The UN has sent inspectors into the country. Now this was arranged months ago and they have been inspecting. The reason they cannot inspect parts of Damascus is that there were no chemical weapon sites to inspect and that part could be under the control of the so-called rebels or Islamic crusaders as the media portrays them. Now in the voice of Russia they say, and I quote, "The Islamic political and cultural website Islamic Invitation Turkey claims that several videos were uploaded one day before the reports on chemical weapons use near Damascus in Syria. This evidence shows that the terrorists massacred people, then recorded the scenes to deceive the world, but they gave themselves away. Terrorists in Syria uploaded the video of their crimes in East Ghouta, Damascus on August the 20th, 2013 and then blamed the Syrian government for the attack early August 21st, 2013, says the IIT website. We all know that Islamic fundamentalists in any country show no qualms in killing or placing children and babies in the line of fire. That is what they do to make the Western press cry the crocodile tears they do. But you can read the link for yourselves. Read it and remember Bosnia and all the wrong information we are still being subject to in films and books, because one day we British nationalists, whilst at present suffering a total media ban, might be the subject of misinformation and the Hegelian dialectic, which is alive and well in our media and government and indeed throughout all our establishments. Support Assad as being a man who wants to keep his country free from the so-called democratic rule of idiots and retards, who would take his country back to the Dark Ages, as indeed they have done with Western help to many Arab countries over the past few years. Why? Money, oil and troop training. That is why. And finally, French pigeon hunters cause mayhem in English village. Apparently we are now being invaded by French peasants hunting our pigeons. Residents of an English village, Tilmanstone in Kent, said pigeon hunters visiting the area from France are creating the sounds of the Wild West. Councillor Mog Ovenden of the Dover District Council said pigeon hunters around the village of Tilmanstone are causing a danger to the public by shooting across our footpaths and in the process frightening horses. The Daily Telegraph reported Thursday. An 18-year-old woman had to be airlifted to hospital when she was thrown off a horse, startled by the sounds of pigeon hunters. "I've confronted these Frenchmen but don't know what more to do," Ovenden said. Rachel Bates said she was shocked to hear the sounds of the Wild West while visiting her parents in Tilmanstone. Police confirmed there had been tension between locals and the pigeon hunters. They said the injured woman has not moved to file charges over the horse incident. This presenter says, "They may be classed as vermin, but they're our vermin. We have enough with the French exporting their cheap wine and fishing in our fishing waters without them coming over to hunt our birds. I like pigeons and I feed them. In fact, I have quite a few who come back day after day. We love them. And even the cats leave them alone. What to do with these bastards? Either shoot them back or send them to heavily enriched areas so they can catch and kill our swans and barbecue them. I think a hefty fine should do. What would our coppers do if we suddenly sprouted guns and waved them about? They'd kill us, that's what. Most unfair, but it is up to the people of this village to fight back." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and safe bank holiday weekend. There will be no World at 8 on Bank Holiday Monday the 26th of August, but we will be on air again Wednesday the 28th. Our best wishes to the family weekend and hope the sun shines on all of you.